Head to the court. It's been a busy day today in the court. The Accra High Court says that the state can go ahead to extradite British fugitive David McDermott for smuggling some 400 kilograms of cocaine to the United Kingdom. According to the judge, Merle Efua Wood, Ghana has an extradition treaty with the United Kingdom and that the crime in question is not a political one. She also dismissed arguments that narcotic-related issues are not extradition offenses. The court, however, said though the state authorities failed to follow the right process, it cannot be said to have occasioned a substantial miscarriage of justice. The judge then remanded him into prison custody till his extradition warrant is issued. Joining me now in the studio is Raymond Akwa, who was at the court today. I've given a lot of detail, but Raymond, as you will imagine, has the full summary, and he joins me now with it. Raymond, tell us, first of all, how things played out in court, a summary of what happened in court today.
So it was Judgment Day, and this was previously. The arguments were mainly to protect his freedoms and also his interests. That is what his lawyer, Kojoga Dawudu, had argued earlier on, that Ghana and the court in this particular case should be bold enough to forgo a treaty that is 1930 and actually has been repealed by the Extradition Act. So he also said that everything in this country is about procedure. The courts always uphold procedure. The procedure they used in arresting the gentleman and putting him before court was very wrong. In fact, they did not only deceive the earlier court that they had a case against him in Ghana for dealing in drugs, but they also deceived the court by telling them that they had a warrant. When it was actually reviewed, the warrant was coming from an external court, that is the UK court. So everything about this particular process is wrong. And the court in Ghana cannot be seen to supersede a process that is very, very wrong. So that is what started all of the conversation. Then the state responded. Anthony Jambibi is of the opinion that up until this particular time, the only intent of the state is to make sure that the gentleman goes to face trial and get his day in court in a country that the main allegations have been leveled against him. The judge in ruling said she's actually listening to the proceedings. She's also aware that much of the substance that he has to deal with is in the UK. It will be unfair to Ghana and the international fight against what they call it, drug trade, and also the UK, if he is not sent back there to go and face the trial. He also took all of the issues. One, she dismissed the claim that we have no extradition treaty with the UK. In fact, she said there was a slight problem with the law, the Extradition Act. In one breath, it actually repeals the extradition treaty, and on the other hand, grants it under a Commonwealth nation provision. So that could not have been said to be repealed entirely. She also moved on to give some basis for her ruling, being that to her, if you say narcotics does not fall within the extradition offenses in this country, it might be misleading, especially if you've not read the Pharmacy Act, which puts some of these narcotic drugs in the same extradition treaty regime. So it will be very difficult for you to, on one hand, deny them, and when another law is giving them the right to do so. In any case, she says in the ultimate interest of the fight against drugs, two, in the ultimate interest of the two states, Ghana and the UK, the best thing to be done is for him to be sent back to the UK.
All right, so I guess the other question to do with the process will be, Raymond, that is this treaty with the UK enough to go ahead with this extradition process?
She said yes. So far as she's concerned as a judge sitting in the High Court, her duty was to establish that there is no basis for him to go. In fact, she was uncomfortable with the procedure and warned the BNI that she would not entertain any other breach of the procedure. The only reason why she's insisting that the 15 days should be meticulously followed is that to her, this is the only procedure left that they can use to save face. So the next 15 days is when the gentleman has to be kept in prison awaiting his final extradition.
And if that is not followed, then what?
Then she would retract that particular what warrant she gave today, and the whole process will have to start again, or the man be let go.
Okay. Now, all of this is about one man, David McDermott. He was in court today.
He was in court in a new shirt, in an ash shirt. He's been wearing his previous ash with stripes of blue for a very long time. Today he was a new shirt. He was not in the flip-flops. He was actually wearing a shoe, a brown one. So this was a new McDermott. And he was confident right from the beginning, but when the judgment started, he was looking up until today. I've always seen him very much confident. When you ask him questions, you answer boldly. But today, nobody asked him a question though, but he was more quiet. He was a bit uncomfortable. I mean, it's Judgment Day, but he was not the usual McDermott that we know.
Okay, and after today's proceedings, you spoke to the lawyer for Mr. McDermott. Clearly, now it's been established that Mr. McDermott will have to be extradited to the United Kingdom. What's been his response to how this whole case has played out?
What he told me is that they have 15 days to file any form of appeal against this particular ruling. They are looking at the options. He's speaking to his client. If his client still believes that he doesn't want to go to the UK because all of his interests, wife, children, pregnant wife, more importantly, is in this country, then they will file that particular habeas corpus to start the process.
We can now hear from Mr. Kujogadaudu.
We have put our argument forcefully. I think the prosecution also put the argument, and the judge largely, entirely agrees with the prosecution. But she acknowledged that we raise pertinent issues, which she thinks that, yes, they have been able to prove before her. We do not agree with some of the issues that she was able to weave around and give a ruling in that. At least we are also happy that she has clearly come out and said that the procedure by which they arrested him, they breached that procedure with impunity. For me, it is one of the things that going forward, I believe that when we want to do things, we will do it properly. Due process is part of the law. So I would definitely speak to my client. I'll have conference with him, and we'll see the way forward. The good thing is also that we have 15 days, as the court itself said, after committing, you cannot be repatriated or extradited until 15 days expires. So we would see what I would advise him and what is his wish. And when I get a firm instruction, I would see the way forward.
Right, so that's for the case of the British fugitive David Philip McDermott. He's been on a run for the past 3 years from the authorities of the UK, but was picked up at his hideout in Accra on the 11th of March this year. But that was not the only court case Raymond Akwa followed today. He also followed a case of the 2 Guantanamo Bay detainees case, which was scheduled to take place today at the Supreme Court. An 86-year-old woman has sued the Attorney General and the Interior Ministry for allowing 2 ex-detainees from Guantanamo Bay to be resettled in Ghana. Mrs. Margaret Banfo, who is a former conference officer at the Foreign Affairs Ministry, wants the Supreme Court to declare the move as highly risky and unconstitutional. Raymond, how did that also go?
So, I mean, to many people, it was an interesting case to follow. So the courtroom was full until everybody was told that, no, we cannot empanel the judges because one actually is indisposed, and that let's postpone it to the 26th. So it was adjourned to the 26th of this month. Okay.
Now, but were all the parties involved at the court today? The US Department of Defense announced on the 6th of January 2016 that the transfer of Mahmoud Umar, Mohammed bin Atef and Khalid from the detention facility at Guantanamo Bay to the government of Ghana was really what it was. So were all the parties present today?
It was only lawyers for the lady, Ms. Banfo, that was actually in court. No other representation of the state, or I'm sure maybe they had hints early on that the court was going to adjourn. Okay. So they were not there.
All right. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Raymond Akwa. And he's been busy today in the courts, and as you can imagine, he has all the details as and when you have them when he reports on such stories. But we're still staying in the courts, but this has a bit of a political twist. You remember Mr. Paul Afoko, don't you? The suspended national chairman of the MPP. The Accra High Court today adjourned the case involving him. Mr. Afoko is challenging his indefinite suspension from the party, arguing that that decision to have him suspended is illegal. The judge hearing the case, Anthony Abua, is however warning against further delay of the process, saying it could amount to infringement of Mr. Afoko's rights. What has led to this? Let's get more details from Kwacha Afreniama. He was in one of the courtrooms at the Accra High Court, not where Raymond was. This was a different case. Afre, tell us what happened in court today.
So first off, today the expectation was that the pre-trial judgment will begin, and when we are talking about the pre-trial judgment, it involves, among others, which witnesses the court would call, which witness statements will be accepted in court when that begins. But that could not happen because lawyers for the MPP told the court that they had not received some essential documents that would allow that to happen. And in fact, even after they had said that, the court mentioned that the case could go ahead. But Mr. Godfrey Dami, legal representative of the MPP, the man leading the lawyers in court, said that they want the right processes to be followed. So the court had to adjourn today's case to tomorrow. But it was at this point that the presiding judge, Anthony Yeboah, mentioned that, well, due to the fact that he doesn't want Mr. Paul Afoko's right to be infringed upon, he wants an expeditious trial. And he mentioned two key points. Number one, that Mr. Paul Afoko has a limited term of office. Again, that his suspension is indefinite. So if this trial is not expeditious enough, it could so happen that by the time the court gives its ruling on the matter, his term of office
will have even expired,
depending on which way it goes. But as you saw there in the visuals, Mr. Paul Afoko himself was in court, followed by teaming supporters who were there to give him moral support. And after court proceedings, they were singing and chanting, but you had some people as well, in fact, representatives of the party's incumbent executives. You had, for example, the chairman of the party's council of elders who were there, and those party supporters who came with them were hooting at Mr. Paul Afoko as he left the court premises. Mr. Afoko there leaving the court complex after court proceedings today, as you can see.
Interesting. So for him, when he appeared in court today, did he say any words afterwards, maybe to his supporters after they came to support him?
Well, Mr. Paul Afoko had, I mean, not as in addressing them, but there were a few of them who went to him, shook hands with a former chairman of the MPP, and he, a word or two, not as audible enough for everyone to hear, but certainly the impression you get is that they were telling him that they were there for him to give him support as the trial proceeds.
Okay. Now, one other thing that came up, Afraid, we also understand that the judge said something about some comments, an instructive comment about gagging people from commenting on the case while it remains in court. Tell us a bit about that. What was that all about? I'm
sure you remember that at the last court hearing, when the MPP filed a contempt suit against Mr. Paul Afoko for some comments that he had passed on a number of media stations, radio stations over the past few days. The judge did not comment on the case at the time, and Mr. Godfrey Dami, his lawyer for the MPP, again had mentioned in court that a section of the media had misrepresented him, created the impression that the MPP wanted to gag Mr. Paul Afoko, prevent him from commenting on what he feels the party's decision means. And it was at this point that the judge mentioned that he, as a human rights judge, would never ask or give a direct order that anybody be prevented from commenting on the matter or say what they feel about Mr. Paul Afoko's decision to go to court. Once those comments or opinions are expressed within the ambit of the law. Francis.
All right, thank you so much, Kwacha, with those details on what happened in court today. We know there was also a press conference. What was that about? Was that different from what happened in court today?
Well, Mr. Paul Afoko's spokesperson, Anaya, spoke, addressed that press conference, and he says that he believes that the court's position so far as the matter relating to gagging the media or otherwise is concerned vindicates Mr. Paul Afoko, because all along what they had said was that Mr. Paul Afoko's decision to speak to media houses and engage the media otherwise was certainly did not mean he was infringing upon any laws.
Okay, we can hear from his spokesperson, and I also.
This was said in court, vindicating Mr. Afoko's position that so long as he doesn't comment on the merits of the matter before the court in the media, nobody can stop him from responding to allegations against him and which are not before the court for determination. For us, that point was very, very instructive. So Mr. Afoko would continue to express his views in response to some frivolous allegations that have been leveled against him when he gets the opportunity. But he is very much aware and he knows the issues before the court. And so, as a law-abiding citizen, he will not veer into the matter that is before the court. He will stay clear of the matter that is before the court and allow the court to do its work.
Right, so that's the spokesperson for Mr. Paul Afoko, the suspended, the national chairman of the MPP, Nana Yaw Osei, there addressing the media after today's court proceedings. And there's still more here on the pause, including red and black draping the streets of Agogo as residents demand the immediate eviction of nomadic herdsmen. But the big question is the call arbitrary, considering reports that the cattle belongs actually to locals, natives of that community? We have details on that story and more for you here. Stay with us.